The implications were clear. Vivian Vance was not just a greedy stepmother, she was a direct threat to Cage's domain. Her actions, her reckless alliance with the Crimson Hand, risked destabilizing the delicate balance of power he had painstakingly built over decades. Ilara Vance, the girl he had pulled from the pool, was no longer just an innocent victim. She was an unwitting pawn in a much larger, far more dangerous game. Her survival, and the truth she unknowingly represented, had become intrinsically linked to the stability of his own empire. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. The water closed over her head, muffling the distant sounds of the gala, replacing them with the roar of her own fear. Her lungs burned, desperate for air, but the weight of the dress and the unexpectedness of the fall rendered her movements clumsy, ineffective. She thrashed, a desperate, flailing puppet pulled by unseen strings, sinking deeper into the sapphire depths. Cage rose from his desk, his silhouette casting a long shadow across the room. The Crimson Hand has overstepped, and Vivian Vance has signed her own death warrant, not just with the law, but with me. His voice was devoid of emotion, yet the cold finality in his tone sent a shiver down Marco's spine. He would deal with Vivian Vance, and he would dismantle the Crimson Hand. And Ilara Vance, the girl who had inadvertently brought this to his attention, would be protected, not out of altruism, but because she was now a vital, if unwitting, piece in his grand design to restore order to his world. The shadow of the Mafia boss was about to fall, and it would be a long, dark one for those who stood in his way. The fragile alliance with Mrs. Gable proved to be Ilara's most potent weapon. Armed with the housekeeper's whispered directions, Ilara embarked on a perilous, clandestine mission within her own home. The manor, once a symbol of her family's legacy, now felt like a battleground. Every shadow a potential hiding place, every creak of the floorboards a warning. Just as the edges of her vision began to blur, and the last vestiges of hope threatened to extinguish, two distinct presences broke through the water's surface beside her. Two powerful hands, one firm and authoritative, the other surprisingly gentle yet undeniably strong, simultaneously clamped onto her arms. She was being pulled upwards, swiftly, forcefully, breaking through the shimmering surface into the cool night air, gasping, sputtering, alive. Her first target was Vivian's study, a room Ilara rarely entered, intimidated by its austere grandeur and the chilling aura of her stepmother's authority. Waiting until the late hours, long after the manor had settled into a deceptive silence, Ilara crept through the darkened corridors, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The only light came from the sliver of moon through the tall windows, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock her stealth. Above her, two faces, starkly different yet equally commanding, loomed into view. One was the stern, impeccably composed visage of President Alaric Thorne, his eyes, usually reserved and calculating, now alight with a fierce, almost primal concern. The other, shrouded in the cool, dangerous aura of the underworld, belonged to Mr. Cage, his features unreadable, yet his grip on her arm was undeniably protective. Reaching the study, Ilara fumbled for the hidden catch Mrs. Gable had described, behind a heavy, ornate painting of a stern-faced ancestor. She found it, a small, almost invisible button. With a soft click, a section of the oak paneling beside the fireplace slid inward, revealing a small, built-in safe. Her hands trembled as she worked the combination Mrs. Gable had painstakingly recalled from a fleeting memory of her father's hushed conversations. The tumblers clicked, and the heavy door swung open with a faint groan. Ilara, dripping and shivering, found herself suspended between two worlds, caught between the leader of the free world and the enigmatic king of the shadows, both having plunged into the chaos to save her. The shocked silence of the gala guests, now gathered at the pool's edge, was deafening. The night, which had promised only a suffocating elegance, had just delivered a plunge into an abyss, and a rescue that defied all logic. Ilara gasped, her lungs burning, as she was hauled from the frigid water. The world spun, a dizzying kaleidoscope of flashing camera lights, hushed gasps, and the frantic murmurs of the gala guests. She coughed, water streaming from her hair and gown, her teeth chattering uncontrollably, not just from the cold, but from the sheer terror that still clung to her like a shroud. Inside, neatly stacked, were the damning documents. There were deeds of sale for properties Alara knew were part of her trust, signed with what looked like her father's forged signature. There were bank statements showing massive withdrawals and transfers to offshore accounts. Accounts linked to shell corporations Alara now recognized from her own desperate research. And then there were the ledgers. Not the old, legitimate ones, but new, meticulously kept books, detailing the flow of money, the dates, the names of the investors. Names that sent a cold shiver down her spine. Names that sounded less like business partners and more like figures from the criminal underworld. She found herself propped up on the edge of the pool, caught between the two men who had saved her. President Alaric Thorne, his usually immaculate suit now clinging to him, dripping water onto the pristine marble, exuded an aura of controlled power. His eyes, a piercing blue, scanned her face with an intensity that made her shiver for a different reason. There was a sternness there, an authoritative concern that felt both reassuring and slightly intimidating. But the most damning evidence lay at the bottom of the safe, a stack of printed emails. They were correspondences between Vivian and an unknown party, detailing the liquidation plan for the Vance estate, the contingency measures for Alara's upcoming 21st birthday, and chillingly, a brief, almost casual mention of the gala incident. The accident was messy, but necessary. She won't be a problem now. The words were a knife to Alara's gut, confirming her darkest fears. Vivian had orchestrated the pool incident, a desperate, last-ditch effort to eliminate Alara before she could expose the truth. Beside him, Mr. Cage was a stark contrast. His dark clothes, though wet, seemed to absorb the light, making him appear even more formidable. Water slicked his dark hair, but his expression remained unreadable. His eyes, dark and piercing, held a chilling stillness. His hand, still gripping her arm, was surprisingly gentle, yet the sheer force of his presence was undeniable. He was a predator, she instinctively knew, but for this moment, he was her protector. Alara photographed every document, every page of the ledger, every incriminating email with her old, discreet phone, its flash muted, its clicks barely audible. She worked swiftly, her fingers numb with a mix of adrenaline and horror. This wasn't just about money, it was about a calculated attempt on her life, a betrayal so profound it left her breathless. "Are you all right, Miss Vance?" President Thorne's voice was deep, resonant, accustomed to commanding attention. He knelt beside her, his gaze unwavering, as she carefully replaced everything and closed the safe. The weight of the truth settled upon her. Her stepmother wasn't just greedy, she was a criminal, entangled with dangerous forces, willing to commit murder to achieve her aims. The pool incident wasn't a random act of malice, it was a desperate, final gamble by a woman whose carefully constructed web of lies was on the verge of unraveling. Before Alara could form a coherent reply, Mr. Cage's voice, a low, gravelly rumble, cut through the air. "She's in shock. She needs a doctor, not an interrogation." His words, though directed at Thorne, held an underlying challenge, a subtle assertion of his own authority. Alara crept back to her room, the phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. The images on its screen were irrefutable proof, a weapon forged in the heart of her betrayal. She had the truth. Now, she just needed to find a way to unleash it. The gilded cage had become a powder keg, and Alara, armed with the spark of truth, was ready to ignite it. The phone, still warm from her clandestine mission, felt like a burning coal in Alara's hand. The images stored within it were not just photographs, they were a declaration of war. The truth, raw and undeniable, pulsed through her veins, replacing fear with a cold, resolute anger. She couldn't wait. She wouldn't. The time for hiding was over. The tension between the two men was palpable, a silent current crackling in the air. It was a clash of titans, the legitimate power of the state meeting the formidable, shadowy influence of the underworld, all centered on her, a girl who felt utterly insignificant. She found Vivian and Serafina in the grand drawing room, sipping tea, their faces composed in their usual masks of refined indifference. The sight of them, so casually enjoying the spoils of their deceit, ignited a spark of fury that had long been suppressed. "My security team is already on it, Mr. Cage," Thorne replied, his tone smooth, but his jaw subtly tightened. "This is a matter of public safety, and Miss Vance's well-being is paramount." Vivian, Ilara began, her voice surprisingly steady, though her hands trembled slightly behind her back. We need to talk. Cage merely raised an eyebrow, a gesture that spoke volumes. And mine, President, is ensuring no one interferes with what's mine. The implication hung heavy in the air, that Ilara, by virtue of his rescue, was now, in some unspoken way, under his purview. Vivian raised an eyebrow, a flicker of annoyance crossing her perfectly sculpted features. Darling, must you always be so dramatic? Can't it wait until after tea? Ilara, shivering violently, felt like a prize, a pawn in a game she didn't understand. The stares of the gala guests, a mixture of shock, curiosity, and thinly veiled judgment, felt like physical blows. She wanted to disappear, to vanish from this surreal tableau. No, Ilara countered, stepping further into the room, her eyes fixed on her stepmother. It can't. It's about father, and about what you've done. A flurry of activity erupted as Thorne's security detail, efficient and discreet, moved in. A warm blanket was draped over her shoulders, and a medic, summoned by Thorne's staff, began a quick assessment. Mr. Cage, however, did not relinquish his position. He stood over her, a silent, imposing guardian, his eyes never leaving her, or President Thorne. Serafina let out a dismissive titter. Oh, Ilara, still clinging to your delusions, father left everything to us. You know, you're just a sad little afterthought. We need to get her inside, Thorne stated, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. Away from the cameras. Is that so? Ilara pulled out her phone, her thumb already navigating to the incriminating photos. She held it up, displaying the first image, a forged deed of sale for a property that was unequivocally part of her trust. Does this look like an afterthought, Vivian, or does it look like fraud? Agreed, Cage responded, his voice surprisingly cooperative. Yet his eyes held a glint of something unyielding. My car is waiting. Vivian's teacup clattered against its saucer, a tiny tremor running through her hand. Her composure cracked, revealing a flash of genuine alarm. What is this nonsense? Ilara, where did you get that? The air in Sterling Manor hummed with the decadent symphony of wealth. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto polished marble floors, reflecting the shimmering gowns and sharp suits of the city's elite. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft murmur of hushed conversations blended into a sophisticated hum, a backdrop to the annual gala, the most anticipated event of the social calendar. From your safe, Vivian, the one behind the fireplace in your study. And this, Ilara scrolled to the next image, a bank statement detailing a massive transfer to an offshore account linked to Cerberus Holdings. Is just the beginning. I have it all. The forged signatures, the hidden ledgers, the emails detailing your liquidation plan for the entire estate, and your contingency measures for my 21st birthday. She paused, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper. Including the accident at the gala, Thorne's expression flickered, a hint of annoyance crossing his face before it was quickly masked. With all due respect, Mr. Cage, Miss Vance will be escorted by my security to a private suite within the manor. She will be safe there. The color drained from Vivian's face. Serafina gasped, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and dawning comprehension. The elegant drawing room, moments before filled with polite silence, now crackled with raw, exposed malice. Safe. Perhaps, Cage countered, a faint, chilling smile touching his lips. But not secure. Not from the one who pushed her. You little fool! Vivian shrieked, her voice losing all pretense of sophistication. She lunged forward, her hand outstretched, desperate to snatch the phone. Give me that! Ilara's head snapped up. The words, spoken with such quiet certainty, sent a fresh wave of ice through her veins. He knew, or at least, he suspected. The accident was no accident. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, cutting through the lingering shock and cold. Ilara, anticipating the move, sidestepped, clutching the phone tightly. It's too late, Vivian. The truth is out. You're finished. As the medic helped her to her feet, Ilara found herself caught in the silent tug-of-war between the two powerful men. President Thorne offered a steadying hand, his touch reassuring, a symbol of legitimate authority and protection. Mr. Cage, though not touching her, radiated a possessive vigilance, an unspoken promise of a different kind of safety, one that operated outside the rules. Vivian's eyes, now blazing with a terrifying rage, darted to Serafina. Get her! Get the phone! She was led away, a blanket wrapped tightly around her, the whispers of the crowd following her like a phantom echo. The last thing she saw before the doors closed behind her was President Thorne and Mr. Cage, still standing by the pool, their gazes locked. Two formidable forces on an unexpected collision course. Their shared interest in her, the only bridge between their disparate worlds. Alara was safe, for now, but the bizarre dual rescue had only deepened the mystery, leaving her with a chilling sense that her life had just taken an irreversible, dangerous turn. The private suite, luxurious and hushed, felt less like a sanctuary and more like another gilded cage. Alara, wrapped in a plush robe provided by President Thorne's discreet staff, sat by the window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. The warmth of the blanket and the hot tea did little to thaw the icy dread that had settled in her stomach. Mr. Cage's words echoed in her mind, not from the one who pushed her. Serafina, though initially stunned, recovered quickly. She moved to block the door, her face contorted in a snarl. You won't get away with this. Alara, you'll regret this. It wasn't an accident. The certainty of it, once a chilling whisper, was now a deafening roar. The memory of the forceful shove, the distinct feeling of being propelled forward, was too vivid, too intentional. And as the initial shock began to recede, a name, sharp and bitter, rose to the surface of her thoughts. Vivienne. Alara knew she had to act fast. She couldn't fight both of them, not in her current state. Her gaze swept the room, searching for an escape route. The large French doors leading to the garden were her only hope. Her stepmother, Vivienne Vance, a woman of impeccable poise and chilling ambition, had always viewed Alara as an inconvenient obstacle. Since the death of Alara's father a year ago, Vivienne and her stepsister, Serafina, had systematically dismantled Alara's life, piece by agonizing piece. The once vibrant Vance estate, a symbol of their family's enduring legacy, was now a hollow shell, its grandeur masking a rapidly deteriorating financial reality. Alara knew her father's business had been struggling, but Vivienne's constant reassurances had lulled her into a false sense of security. Now, a cold dread told her those reassurances were lies. As Vivienne lunged again, her manicured nails clawing, Alara threw a heavy antique vase, sending it crashing to the floor, creating a momentary distraction. The loud shatter made Vivienne flinch, giving Alara the precious seconds she needed. She sprinted towards the French doors, pushing them open with a desperate shove. Alara's father had left a complex will, one that granted Alara a significant portion of his remaining assets and a controlling interest in a trust, contingent upon her reaching the age of 21, which was just a few months away. Vivienne, as the executor, had always been evasive about the details, citing complex legalities. But now, the pieces began to click into place with terrifying clarity. If Alara were to disappear or be deemed incapable, Vivienne and Serafina would gain full control. The pool incident wasn't just an act of malice, it was a desperate, calculated move. Stop her! Vivienne screamed, her voice echoing through the manor. A knock on the door startled her. It was one of Thorne's aides, a crisp, efficient woman named Agent Davies. Miss Vance, President Thorne sends his regards and wishes to ensure you are comfortable. We have a security detail stationed outside your door. You are safe here. Alara burst into the cool night air, the manicured garden a blur as she ran. Footsteps pounded behind her, the enraged shouts of Vivienne and Serafina growing fainter as she plunged deeper into the shadows. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away, to find someone who could help her expose the full extent of Vivienne's crimes. The manor, once her home, was now a dangerous trap, and she had just narrowly escaped its gilded confines, armed with nothing but the truth and a desperate hope for justice. Alara's desperate flight from Sterling Manor was a blur of adrenaline and raw instinct. She ran through the moonlit gardens, the sounds of Vivienne's enraged screams fading behind her, replaced by the pounding of her own heart. She didn't have a destination, only an overwhelming need to put as much distance as possible between herself and the gilded prison she had just escaped. The phone, still clutched tightly in her hand, was her only weapon, her only hope. Alara nodded, managing a weak smile. Thank you, Agent Davies. I appreciate it. Unbeknownst to Alara, her confrontation with Vivian had sent shockwaves through two very different, yet equally powerful networks. Of course, the president also wanted me to relay that an investigation into the incident is underway. Every angle is being explored. Agent Davies's gaze was professional, yet held a hint of genuine concern. In the president's secure command center, Agent Davies's phone buzzed with an urgent alert. A discreet GPS tracker, planted on Ilara's phone by Thorne's security team after the gala, had just registered a rapid, erratic movement away from Sterling Manor. Simultaneously, intelligence intercepts confirmed a flurry of panicked, encrypted communications from Vivian Vance, mentioning exposure, the girl, and eliminating loose ends. Every angle Ilara repeated, her voice barely a whisper, including a deliberate act. Mr. President, Davies's voice was sharp with urgency. Miss Vance has fled the manor. Vivian Vance is mobilizing. It appears Miss Vance has exposed her, and she's now a direct target. Agent Davies's expression remained neutral, but her eyes held steady. The president is committed to uncovering the truth. Miss Vance, President Thorne, who had been reviewing the latest financial reports linking Vivian to Cerberus Holdings, slammed his hand on the desk. She has the evidence. Davies. Vivian will stop at nothing to silence her. Get a team to her last known location. Immediately. I want her secured, unharmed, and I want Vivian Vance apprehended. This is our chance to bring down Cerberus. His voice was calm, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. He knew Ilara was no longer just a victim. She was a witness, a key piece of evidence in a much larger, more dangerous game. Her safety was paramount, not just for justice, but for the success of his entire operation. After Agent Davies left, Ilara felt a renewed surge of determination. She was no longer just a victim. She was a target, and she needed to understand why. The comfortable suite suddenly felt like a prison. She had to get out, to find answers, to fight back. Her family's honor, her father's memory, and her own future depended on it. The opulence of the gala, the flashing lights, the two powerful men who had saved her. It all faded into the background, replaced by the chilling reality of her own home, where the real danger lurked. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that the accident was just the beginning. While Ilara grappled with the chilling realization of Vivian's treachery, two powerful forces, seemingly disparate, had already begun to move. President Alaric Thorne and Mr. Cage, each from their own distinct world, launched discreet, yet highly effective, investigations into the pool incident. Their motives were vastly different, yet their paths, unbeknownst to them, were destined to converge. At the same moment, across the city, in the opulent, yet chillingly stark, confines of Mr. Cage's inner sanctum, Marco burst in, his face grim. Boss, we have a situation. Our sources within the Vance household report a major confrontation. Ilara Vance has just fled the manor, and Vivian Vance has put out a direct order to her associates to handle the girl permanently. President Thorne, a man whose life was meticulously ordered and whose every action was weighed against its political implications, viewed the incident at the gala with a cold, analytical eye. The presence of a high-profile figure like himself, coupled with the dramatic nature of the event, demanded a swift and thorough response. His initial concern was for Ilara's safety, but beneath that, a deeper apprehension stirred. Was this an isolated act of malice, or a symptom of something larger? Something that could threaten national security or expose a network of corruption reaching into the highest echelons of society. Cage rose from his chair, his dark eyes burning with a cold fury. The crimson hand, Vivian, in her desperation, was turning to them. This wasn't just about protecting Ilara anymore. It was about asserting his dominance, about eliminating a rival syndicate that had dared to encroach on his territory and threaten his carefully constructed order. The girl was a catalyst, and now she was in mortal danger. From the moment Ilara was safely secured in the manor, Thorne had activated his most trusted intelligence agencies. Elite analysts began sifting through guest lists, security footage, and financial records connected to the Vance family. His agents, trained in the art of subtle infiltration, moved through the city's underbelly and its gilded towers, collecting whispers and data points. Thorne wasn't just looking for a culprit, he was looking for connections, for the threads that might lead to a larger conspiracy. He had a reputation for ruthlessness when it came to protecting the integrity of his office and the nation. And this incident, however minor it might seem on the surface, had the potential to unravel into something far more significant. He wanted answers, and he wanted them fast. "She has the proof," Cage stated, his voice a low growl. "Vivian wouldn't be this desperate otherwise. She's a loose cannon, and the Crimson Hand will use her to their advantage. Find Alara Vance, now, before those animals get to her." He didn't need to explain his reasoning to Marco. His lieutenant understood the unspoken code of their world. Protecting Alara was now a matter of strategic necessity, a move to dismantle the Crimson Hand and reassert his control. Meanwhile, in the shadowy labyrinth of the city's underworld, Mr. Cage operated with an equally chilling efficiency. His reasons for investigating were far more personal, yet no less potent. Alara Vance, though an outsider to his world, had inadvertently become a focal point, a disruption. Cage's empire thrived on order, on a delicate balance of power and unspoken rules. An attack at a high-profile event, especially one involving the president, threatened that balance. More importantly, his instincts, honed over years of navigating betrayal and deceit, told him there was more to Alara's accident than met the eye. He had seen the fear in her eyes, the genuine terror, and he recognized the scent of calculated malice. Two powerful forces, the legitimate authority of the state and the ruthless efficiency of the underworld, were now converging on a single, vulnerable target. President Thorne's security detail, a convoy of black SUVs, sped through the city streets, lights flashing discreetly. Mr. Cage's enforcers, silent and swift, moved through the shadows, their vehicles unmarked, their intentions lethal. Cage dispatched his own network of informants and enforcers. Unlike Thorne's legitimate channels, Cage's methods were brutal and direct. Information was extracted through intimidation, through whispered threats in dark alleys, through the leverage of favors owed. He wasn't interested in political ramifications. He was interested in the truth, in who dared to disrupt his city, and why. His focus was laser-sharp: find the one who pushed her, and understand their motive. He had a suspicion that this wasn't just about a girl. It was about something larger, something that might infringe upon his own carefully constructed domain. Their separate paths, though divergent, began to subtly converge. Thorne's intelligence, meticulously gathered and cross-referenced, started to hint at illicit financial dealings connected to the Vance family's recent troubles, leading towards powerful, yet shady, conglomerates. Cage's informants, digging into the same financial undercurrents from a different angle, began to uncover whispers of money laundering and organized crime connections, all pointing, disturbingly, towards the same family. Both men, operating in their own spheres, were unknowingly closing in on the same target, a dangerous web of deceit that centered around Alara Vance and the secrets of her crumbling legacy. The unseen protectors were at work, their shadows lengthening, unknowingly destined to meet again. Returning to Sterling Manor after the gala was like stepping into a different dimension. The opulent halls, once filled with the echoes of polite conversation and the clinking of glasses, now felt eerily silent, the grandeur replaced by a suffocating sense of dread. Ilara's private suite, arranged by President Thorne's staff, had been a brief respite, but her true prison awaited her within the very walls of her home. Vivian and Serafina, her stepmother and stepsister, were masters of subtle cruelty. They didn't need overt threats. Their methods were far more insidious. From the moment Alara stepped back through the manor doors, she felt their grip tighten. Her phone, once a lifeline to the outside world, was now constantly monitored, its battery mysteriously draining, its signal frequently lost. Her internet access became sporadic, her emails intercepted. When she tried to reach out to old friends, their calls went unanswered, or she was met with cold, dismissive tones. Vivian had begun subtly poisoning her reputation, weaving tales of Ilara's supposed instability and erratic behavior following her father's death. Suddenly, the heavy metal door at the far end of the warehouse groaned open, revealing a silhouette against the faint streetlights. It was Vivian, her face contorted with a chilling blend of fury and triumph. Beside her stood two hulking figures, their faces grim, their intent unmistakable. Hired thugs. The Crimson Hand. "Darling, are you feeling well?" Vivian would ask, her voice dripping with false concern, her eyes, however, holding a chilling glint of triumph. "You've been rather withdrawn lately. Perhaps a quiet evening in your room would be best." "There you are, you little rat," Vivian hissed, her voice echoing eerily in the vast space. "Did you really think you could escape me? You're nothing, Ilara. Just a nuisance. And now, you're going to disappear for good." Serafina, ever the eager accomplice, would chime in. "Yes, Ilara. We're just worried about you. This whole accident has clearly shaken you." Her smile was a saccharine mask, hiding the venom beneath. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. She was cornered. The air grew thick with despair. But then, a flicker of defiance ignited within her. She wouldn't go down without a fight. She had the truth, and she would make sure it saw the light of day. Ilara's movements within the manor were meticulously observed. The staff, once friendly and familiar, now averted their eyes. Seemingly under Vivienne's thumb, even simple walks in the garden were met with Vivienne's concern about her fragile state. The once bustling Vance estate, now devoid of most of its original staff, felt like a mausoleum, trapping her inside its decaying grandeur. Just as Vivienne gestured to her thugs, a sudden blinding flash of headlights cut through the darkness outside. The screech of tires echoed, followed by the authoritative thud of heavy boots. The main entrance to the warehouse burst open, and a squad of President Thorne's security detail stormed in. Their tactical gear glinting, their weapons raised. The isolation was crushing, but it also fueled a desperate fire within Ilara. She refused to be broken. Her father had taught her resilience, a quiet strength that Vivienne and Serafina underestimated. She spent hours in her room, hunched over her old, battered laptop, the only device Vivienne hadn't managed to completely control, meticulously researching. She scoured university websites for scholarship opportunities, searching for any path that could lead her away from this gilded cage. She knew she couldn't rely on her family for tuition. Their finances, or rather, Vivienne's control over them, was clearly a weapon. "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" a commanding voice boomed. She also began discreetly searching for jobs. Any job that could provide her with an independent income, a means to escape. The irony wasn't lost on her. The heiress of a once great fortune was now reduced to secretly seeking entry-level positions. But the thought of freedom, of reclaiming her life, was a powerful motivator. Vivienne froze, her eyes widening in disbelief and panic. The thugs, momentarily stunned, hesitated. But before the president's men could fully secure the area, another set of figures emerged from the shadows, moving with a silent, predatory grace that was far more chilling than the overt display of force. Every night, after Vivienne and Serafina had retired, Ilara would creep down to the old library, a room Vivienne rarely entered, deeming it dusty and unfashionable. There, amidst the rows of forgotten books, she would pore over old financial ledgers her father had kept, hidden away in a secret compartment. She remembered him mentioning them once, a contingency, just in case. She hoped they contained answers, a key to understanding the true extent of Vivienne's deception and a way to fight back. The air in the library, thick with the scent of aged paper and dust, felt like a breath of fresh air compared to the suffocating atmosphere of the rest of the manor. Ilara was trapped, but not defeated. She was a caged bird. Yes, but one meticulously sharpening its beak, waiting for the moment to peck its way to freedom. Days bled into weeks at Sterling Manor, each one a relentless cycle of Vivienne and Serafina's subtle psychological warfare and Ilara's desperate, clandestine search for answers. Her nights were spent hunched over her father's old ledgers in the dusty library, the numbers blurring into a dizzying testament to their family's dwindling fortune. The intricate web of Vivienne's financial maneuvering was slowly, agonizingly, coming into focus, but a direct link to the pool incident remained elusive. Mr. Cage, meanwhile, in the separate, meticulously managed worlds of President Thorne and Mr. Cage, their investigations continued, each drawing closer to the truth, though from vastly different angles. He stepped into the faint light, his presence radiating an almost tangible aura of danger. Behind him, his enforcers, a disciplined unit of formidable men, fanned out, their movements fluid and deadly. They were not here to make arrests, they were here to eliminate a threat. In the sterile, high-tech command center of the Presidential Intelligence Agency, Agent Davies was reviewing hours of security footage from the gala. Most of it was mundane, a blur of smiling faces and clinking champagne flutes. But a brief, almost imperceptible flicker caught her eye. Just moments before Ilara's plunge, a figure had moved swiftly behind her, a flash of dark fabric. The angle was poor, the light too dim, but something about the movement felt deliberate. As she zoomed in, enhancing the pixelated image, she noticed a small, almost insignificant detail on the ground near where Ilara had been standing, a discarded handkerchief. It was a delicate, almost antique piece, heavily perfumed, and bore a faint, intricate embroidery, a single, stylized rose. It was an odd detail, out of place amidst the modern luxury. Davies flagged it, a tiny anomaly in a sea of data, and sent it up the chain of command to President Thorne. Vivienne Vance. Cage's voice was a low, dangerous growl that cut through the escalating tension. You've made a grave mistake. You threatened what's mine. And you aligned with rats? Across the city, in a grittier, less polished setting. One of Mr. Cage's street-level informants, a man known only as Whisper, was piecing together fragments of gossip from the Manor's disgruntled former staff. Vivienne Vance was known for her extravagant tastes, her penchant for designer perfumes, and her collection of antique lace. Whisper had heard a rumor, a fleeting comment from a dismissed maid, about Vivienne's obsession with a particular, rare rose-scented perfume and her collection of custom-embroidered handkerchiefs, each bearing her personal crest, a stylized rose. The maid had mentioned Vivienne's fury over losing one such handkerchief recently. A chaotic battle erupted. Thorne's men, disciplined and precise, engaged Vivienne's thugs, their movements swift and strategic. Gunshots cracked, echoing like thunder in the cavernous space. Amidst the pandemonium, Cage's enforcers moved like ghosts, their targets the Crimson Hand operatives, their efficiency brutal. Whisper's information, raw and unverified, made its way up to Cage, the Mafia boss. A connoisseur of details, found the coincidence intriguing. A lost handkerchief, a distinctive scent, a unique embroidery, and a fall into a pool. It was too neat. He dispatched a few of his more discreet operatives to quietly investigate Vivienne Vance's personal habits, her recent movements, and any connections she might have to the city's shadier elements. He also put out feelers for anyone seen near the pool just before the incident, especially anyone who might have been wearing a strong, floral perfume. Vivienne, caught between two unstoppable forces, shrieked, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. She tried to flee, but a quick movement from one of Cage's men blocked her path. Neither Thorne nor Cage yet knew of the other's findings. Thorne's team was focused on the political and financial implications, seeing the handkerchief as a potential link to a larger network. Cage, on the other hand, saw it as a direct clue to the perpetrator, a signature left behind. But both, independently, had zeroed in on the same seemingly innocuous detail. The embroidered rose, a symbol of beauty and secrecy, was beginning to unfurl its petals, hinting at the thorny truth hidden beneath. It was the first tangible clue, a thread leading directly to Vivienne, and a silent confirmation that the accident was, in fact, a meticulously planned act. The discovery of the embroidered handkerchief, though unknown to Ilara, had ignited a fierce resolve within her. The subtle clues, the chilling certainty that she had been deliberately pushed, solidified her suspicions about Vivienne. But how to fight back when every avenue seemed blocked, every whisper monitored? Ilara, seizing the moment amidst the chaos, scrambled out from her hiding spot, her voice raw with emotion. She forged my father's will. She's been laundering money for the Crimson Hand. I have the proof. She held up her phone, its screen still displaying the incriminating documents. A desperate plea for justice. It was in the quiet, often overlooked corners of Sterling Manor that Ilara found her first and most unexpected ally. Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, was a woman woven into the very fabric of the Vance family. Her silver hair was always neatly pinned, her uniform impeccably starched, and her eyes, though often downcast, held a depth of kindness Ilara had always found comforting. Mrs. Gable had served Ilara's father for decades, witnessing the family's triumphs and tragedies. And now, Vivienne's insidious reign. President Thorne, who had just entered the warehouse. His face grim but resolute, saw Alara and her phone. He nodded to Agent Davies, who immediately moved to secure Alara and the evidence. Cage, his dark eyes fixed on Vivian, watched as her world imploded. His mission was clear: dismantle the Crimson Hand and ensure Vivian Vance faced the consequences, not just of the law, but of crossing him. Alara had noticed Mrs. Gable's subtle acts of defiance, a discreetly left teacup when Alara was confined to her room, a knowing glance when Vivian's back was turned, a whispered word of encouragement that felt like a lifeline. One afternoon, as Alara was attempting to mend a tear in an old family tapestry, a task Vivian had assigned to keep her occupied and away from anything important, Mrs. Gable approached her. The grand showdown was a symphony of destruction, a clash of power, and a desperate cry for truth. In the heart of it all, Alara, the girl who had been pushed into the pool, had finally exposed the darkness that had consumed her family, and her two unlikely saviors had arrived, simultaneously, to ensure justice was served. The echoing gunshots and the brutal efficiency of Mr. Cage's enforcers slowly faded, replaced by the sharp commands of President Thorne's security detail. The abandoned warehouse, moments ago a battleground of shadows and desperate cries, now settled into a tense, uneasy calm. Vivian Vance, her face streaked with tears and dirt, was pinned against a rusted pillar by one of Cage's men, her earlier fury replaced by a chilling, desperate fear. Serafina, found cowering behind a stack of crates, was quickly apprehended by Thorne's agents. Miss Alara, Mrs. Gable began, her voice low, almost a murmur as she pretended to dust a nearby antique. Your father, he was a good man. He wouldn't want to see you like this. President Thorne, his expression grim, walked towards Alara, who was being carefully attended to by Agent Davies. Miss Vance, he said, his voice firm, but with an underlying note of relief. Are you harmed? Alara's heart leaped. It was the first direct acknowledgement of her plight from anyone within the manor. She looked up, her eyes meeting Mrs. Gable's. Mrs. Gable, I don't know what to do. Vivian? She's changing everything. Alara shook her head, clutching her phone. No, Mr. President, I'm all right, but I have the proof. Everything. She held out the phone, its screen still displaying the damning emails and ledgers. Mrs. Gable sighed, a sound heavy with years of unspoken observations. She's always been a viper, that one, even before your father passed. But now, she's reckless, desperate. She paused, glancing over her shoulder before leaning in slightly. She's been selling things, not just the small things, mind you, but the land, the old investments, things your father held dear. Thorne nodded, his gaze sweeping over the scene. Agent Davies, secure the evidence and ensure Miss Vance receives full protection. This is over. Alara's breath hitched. The land. But that's part of the trust. It can't be sold until I'm 21. Meanwhile, Mr. Cage, a silent, imposing figure, surveyed the scene with a cold satisfaction. His enforcers had efficiently neutralized the Crimson Hand operatives, leaving them incapacitated and awaiting the arrival of Thorne's men. He approached Vivian, his eyes like chips of obsidian. Alara, disoriented and terrified, found herself on the outskirts of the city, near an abandoned industrial district, the only place she could think of that offered both cover and anonymity. The cold night air bit at her exposed skin, and the distant wail of sirens, whether for her or for someone else, only heightened her panic. She ducked into the decaying shell of an old warehouse, its broken windows like vacant eyes staring into the darkness. She was alone, hunted, and the race against time had just begun. Both her saviors, President Thorne and Mr. Cage, were closing in. But who would reach her first, and what would happen when they did? The abandoned warehouse was a cavernous maw of shadow and decay, its broken windows like vacant eyes staring out into the desolate industrial district. Alara huddled behind a stack of rusted machinery, her breath ragged, the cold seeping into her bones. The distant wail of sirens, growing louder then fading, had sent her deeper into the labyrinthine structure, a desperate attempt to evade capture. She clutched her phone, its screen a dim beacon in the oppressive darkness, the incriminating photos still her only hope. The Crimson Hand is finished in this city. Vivian, Cage stated, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. And your part in their operations, your betrayal of the Vance legacy, will not go unpunished. You played a dangerous game, and you lost. He then nodded to his enforcer, who released Vivian, allowing Thorne's agents to take her into custody. Cage had ensured his own brand of justice was meted out before the official channels took over. This was it. The missing piece. Vivian wasn't just trying to control the inheritance. She was actively liquidating assets, likely to cover her own illicit dealings. The pool incident was an act of desperation to eliminate the one person who could expose her before she could complete her scheme. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Vivian Vance and Serafina were immediately taken into federal custody. The evidence Ilara had meticulously gathered, combined with the intelligence President Thorne's agencies had amassed, painted an irrefutable picture of fraud, embezzlement, and a dangerous alliance with a notorious crime syndicate. The media, initially captivated by the dramatic rescue at the gala, now exploded with headlines exposing the shocking truth behind the Vance family's downfall and Vivian's criminal enterprise. Mrs. Gable, do you know where she keeps these papers? The real ones, Ilara asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and burgeoning hope. President Thorne ensured a thorough and transparent legal process. The full extent of Vivian's illicit dealings with Cerberus Holdings and the Crimson Hand was laid bare in court, shocking the nation. The trials were swift, the evidence overwhelming. Vivian and Serafina were convicted on multiple counts, facing lengthy prison sentences, their carefully constructed world of deceit and greed crumbling into dust. The housekeeper hesitated, her gaze flickering towards the door. She has a safe. In her study, behind the false panel in the fireplace. Your father showed me once, long ago. Said it was for important family matters. She paused again, her resolve strengthening. And there's a ledger, a small, red one. He kept it separate from the others, said it held the true accounting of his affairs. I saw Vivian with it, just after the funeral. She was agitated. Mr. Cage, operating from the shadows, ensured that the remnants of the Crimson Hand Syndicate were systematically dismantled. Their networks were severed, their operations crippled, and their influence in the city was permanently eradicated. He had restored the delicate balance of the underworld, reinforcing his own power while simultaneously ensuring that Vivian's criminal ties were severed, leaving her utterly isolated and facing the full consequences of her actions. Ilara felt a surge of adrenaline. The red ledger. Her father had mentioned it once. A contingency. A backup. This was it. This was the proof she needed. Ilara, finally free from the shadow of betrayal and the constant threat to her life, began the long and arduous process of healing. The initial shock gave way to a quiet strength, a resilience forged in the fires of adversity. She watched the news reports, saw Vivian and Serafina led away in handcuffs, and felt a profound sense of closure. Justice, in its many forms, had been served. The unexpected silent guardians who had saved her that night at the pool had, in their own ways, ensured her deliverance and the restoration of a semblance of order. The Vance name, though tarnished, could now begin the slow path to redemption, guided by Ilara's unwavering spirit. Months blurred into a new rhythm for Ilara, a quiet period of rebuilding and reflection. The grand, echoing halls of Sterling Manor were now silent, stripped of Vivian's toxic presence. The legal battles had concluded, the last echoes of the scandal fading from the headlines. The Vance name, though forever marked by the recent events, was slowly beginning to shed its tarnished image, guided by Ilara's quiet determination. Thank you, Mrs. Gable, Ilara said, her voice filled with a profound gratitude. You have no idea what this means. Her reclaimed inheritance, once a source of bitter conflict, became a foundation for a new purpose. Ilara, having experienced the crushing weight of vulnerability and the profound impact of unexpected aid, established the Obsidian Rose Foundation. Its mission was simple yet profound: to provide support, resources, and mentorship to young women facing difficult circumstances, whether financial hardship, family betrayal, or the daunting challenge of navigating a complex world alone. She poured her energy into it, turning her trauma into a wellspring of strength for others. The foundation's symbol was a stylized black rose, a subtle nod to the dark period she had overcome, and the resilience that bloomed from it. Mrs. Gable offered a rare, small smile. Just be careful. Miss Ilara. She's dangerous, and she won't stop at anything. She then straightened, resuming her dusting, her face once again impassive as if their conversation had never happened. Ilara found peace in the work, in seeing the lives she touched begin to flourish. She sold Sterling Manor, its grandeur too steeped in painful memories, and moved into a more modest, yet elegant, home, a place that felt truly her own. She pursued her studies, excelling in her chosen field, no longer burdened by the constant threat of Vivian's schemes. The alliance was fragile, built on hushed whispers and shared loyalty to a forgotten past, but it was enough. Armed with Mrs. Gable's crucial snippets of information, Ilara now had a target, a direction. The gilded cage still held her, but now she had a map to its hidden escape routes, and a dangerous, desperate plan began to form in her mind. While Ilara, cloistered within Sterling Manor, forged a dangerous alliance with Mrs. Gable, President Alaric Thorne was meticulously orchestrating his own moves. The intelligence reports piling on his desk, meticulously compiled by Agent Davies and her team, painted a disturbing picture. The discarded, embroidered handkerchief had led them down a rabbit hole of illicit financial dealings, connecting Vivian Vance not just to the family's dwindling fortune, but to a vast, shadowy conglomerate known as Cerberus Holdings. President Alaric Thorne remained a distant, yet significant figure in her life. Occasionally, a discreet message would arrive from Agent Davies, a subtle update on Vivian's incarceration, or a quiet assurance of continued vigilance. Thorne, ever the statesman, had ensured that justice was not only served but seen to be served, solidifying his legacy and dismantling a corrupt network. He respected Ilara's quiet strength, her refusal to be a mere victim, and her decision to use her experience for good. Their connection remained unspoken, a mutual understanding forged in the crucible of that chaotic night. Cerberus Holdings, though outwardly legitimate, was a known front for money laundering and other unsavory activities, often used by powerful, corrupt figures to obscure their tracks. The link to Vivian Vance was not just a domestic issue, it touched upon matters of national security and high-level corruption that Thorne had long been determined to dismantle. He saw an opportunity, a chance to strike at a larger beast using Vivian as the unwitting bait. Mr. Cage, true to his nature, vanished back into the shadows. Ilara never saw him again, nor did she expect to. Yet, she felt his presence, a silent, almost imperceptible force that occasionally reminded her of his chilling, yet protective, intervention. Whispers in the city's undercurrents spoke of a renewed order, of a powerful hand that had swept away the encroaching chaos of the Crimson Hand. Cage had ensured his own brand of justice, a ruthless restoration of balance. He had respected her resilience, her courage in exposing the truth, and in his own way, he had ensured her path to a new beginning was clear. Cerberus Holdings has tentacles everywhere. Mr. Resident, Agent Davies reported, her voice crisp and professional as she projected complex flowcharts onto the screen in the Oval Office. Their operations have been notoriously difficult to penetrate, but Vivian Vance's recent transactions, particularly the accelerated liquidation of Vance family assets, show a direct, undeniable link to their shell corporations. Ilara learned that life, even after profound betrayal, could be rebuilt. That strength could be found in the most unexpected places, and that even in the darkest moments, unlikely saviors could emerge from the most disparate worlds. She had faced adversity, confronted evil, and emerged not unscathed, but stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. The obsidian rose, once a symbol of her hidden pain, had transformed into a beacon of hope, a testament to her unwavering spirit, and a promise that justice, in its many forms, would always prevail. Thorne leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the intricate web of connections. So, she's not just embezzling from her stepdaughter, she's actively facilitating a major criminal enterprise. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more thrilling tales of unexpected heroes and justice served, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay with us for the next one, and while you're here, check out our other videos. There's always more to explore. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. Precisely, sir. And the timing of Miss Vance's incident aligns suspiciously with a critical phase of Cerberus's current operations. It suggests Miss Vance was seen as an obstacle, or perhaps a liability. A cold, calculating glint entered Thorne's eyes. He wasn't a man given to emotional outbursts, but injustice, particularly when it intertwined with corruption, ignited a quiet fury within him. "We will not allow this to stand. We will corner her, Davies, through every legitimate channel available. No direct confrontation, not yet. We will squeeze her until she has nowhere left to run." Thorne initiated a series of strategic political maneuvers, subtle yet impactful. He quietly directed federal oversight agencies to begin routine audits of companies linked to Cerberus Holdings. He authorized discreet investigations into the legal firms and financial institutions that had handled the Vance family's recent transactions, specifically looking for irregularities in the sale of assets. He leveraged his influence to push through new, stricter regulations on offshore accounts and shell corporations, creating a tighter net around the very entities Vivian was using. Each action was a carefully placed domino, designed to destabilize Vivian's illicit network without directly revealing the president's hand. He wanted her to feel the pressure, to watch her carefully constructed world begin to crumble from within, forcing her into a corner where she would inevitably expose herself. And in doing so, expose Cerberus Holdings. All the while, Thorne maintained a public facade of concern for Alara Vance. He sent his aides to check on her, ensuring her comfort and safety within the manor. He made public statements about the unfortunate incident at the gala, emphasizing his commitment to ensuring justice for all citizens. It was a masterful performance, a blend of genuine concern and calculated strategy. He knew Alara was a key, an unwitting catalyst in his larger game, and her well-being was essential to his plan. He needed her safe, not just for her sake, but for the sake of the truth she unknowingly held. The president's gambit had begun, a silent, powerful force slowly closing in on its unsuspecting prey. While President Thorne meticulously tightened his legal noose around Cerberus Holdings, Mr. Cage's methods were far more direct and far more brutal. His network, built on fear, loyalty, and an intricate web of favors, had been digging into Vivian Vance's affairs from the moment the embroidered handkerchief was discovered. What they unearthed was far more insidious than simple embezzlement. It was a deep, festering rot that threatened the very foundations of Cage's carefully maintained underworld empire. "She's not just a social climber with a taste for other people's money, boss," reported Marco, Cage's most trusted lieutenant, his voice grim as he laid out a series of encrypted documents and grainy photographs on the polished mahogany desk. "Vivian Vance has been playing a dangerous game. She's been funneling Vance family assets, not just into shell corporations, but directly into the coffers of the Crimson Hand Syndicate." Cage's eyes, usually as still as a frozen lake, narrowed imperceptibly. The Crimson Hand. They were a relatively new, aggressively expanding syndicate, known for their ruthlessness and their disregard for the established territories and unspoken rules of the city's criminal landscape. They were a cancer, and Cage had been watching them, waiting for the right moment to excise them. The fact that Vivian Vance was entangled with them, using her family's dwindling fortune to launder their dirty money and facilitate their illicit operations, was a direct affront. She's been using the Vance estate, the very properties Alara Vance is set to inherit, as collateral for their loans. Marco continued, pointing to a complex financial diagram. "And she's been leveraging her social connections to push their influence into legitimate businesses, providing them with a veneer of respectability. She's found ways," Mrs. Gable whispered, her gaze hardening. "Paperwork, signatures. She's a clever one, with her lawyers. And she's in deep with some very unsavory characters. Men who visit late at night. Not the kind of people your father ever associated with." Cage picked up one of the photographs. It showed Vivian Vance in a dimly lit, nondescript warehouse, shaking hands with a man whose face was obscured by shadow, but whose posture and heavy-set build were unmistakable. A known enforcer for the Crimson Hand, the image confirmed Cage's worst suspicions. Vivian wasn't just a pawn, she was an active, willing participant, a dangerous bridge between the legitimate world and the encroaching chaos of the Crimson Hand. Alara Vance, however, felt a profound disconnect from the glittering spectacle. Her own gown, a borrowed silk creation that felt both exquisite and suffocating, seemed to mock her internal turmoil. She moved through the throng like a ghost, her smile a fragile mask, her mind miles away, grappling with the crumbling foundations of her family's once proud legacy. The Vance name, synonymous with old money and impeccable taste, was now a whispered tragedy, teetering on the precipice of ruin, a secret meticulously guarded by her stepmother, Vivian, and her stepsister, Serafina. So, the girl was an inconvenience, Cage mused, his voice low, almost a whisper, yet filled with chilling intent. A loose end that needed to be tied before she could expose the full extent of Vivian's treachery and her ties to the Crimson Hand. Ilara found herself drifting towards the expansive glass doors that led to the manor's sprawling gardens, seeking a momentary reprieve from the suffocating opulence. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine and the faint chlorine tang from the illuminated swimming pool, a sapphire jewel set into the manicured lawns. She leaned against a stone balustrade, watching the reflections of the mansion lights dance on the water's surface, a fleeting moment of peace in the storm of her life. Marco nodded. It appears so. Boss, her inheritance, her very existence, threatened to unravel Vivian's entire operation, and by extension, the Crimson Hand's expansion into the city. It was then, amidst the soft murmur of the party, that a sudden, forceful pressure slammed into her back. A gasp caught in her throat, cut short as her feet left the ground. Time seemed to stretch, the world tilting violently. The cool night air rushed past her ears, replaced instantly by a shocking, icy embrace. She plunged into the deep end of the pool, the heavy silk of her gown instantly becoming a leaden shroud, dragging her down with terrifying speed.